President Trump rallies lawmakers to pass his government funding priorities. What will it take to get the bill across the finish line? Joining us live in studio is Congressman Marlin Stutzman. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us again.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be with you.
It's great to have you. So just less than an hour ago, President Trump hosting the One Big Beautiful event, as he called, at the White House, rallying congressional Republicans to pass his funding priorities. Before we get to the questions, however, let's hear from the president.
The day I signed this bill into law, almost every major promise made in the 2024 campaign already will have become a promise kept.
Congressman, talk to us about the significance of this bill and what's ultimately in it that the American people need to know about.
Well, Steve, so I'll speak to it from the perspective of Northeast Indiana. We're a heavy manufacturing district. We've actually seen manufacturing leave Indiana and the manufacturing, the Rust Belt, as they call it, because those jobs did go overseas because of bad trade policy that President Trump is trying to fix. But what's in the bill and top priority is that it keeps the Trump tax cuts in place. There's going to be a little bit of maneuvering because of the parliamentarian decisions today, but those Trump tax cuts are really important. On average, if we don't do anything and let those tax rates go back up, that's about a $3,400 on average tax increase to the American people. So that's critical. The other pieces that I think are important: no tax on tips. You know, some people say, oh, you know what, that's not as big, that's not as important as what the president's making out to be. Actually, I was in the restaurant business, and I know how important it is for our wait staff to be able to take that tip money home without paying taxes on it. It may be $20, it may be $100, you know, but it's just a little bit of extra money. The other one that I like is no tax on overtime, because it encourages productivity. It encourages, you know, the employee to take put more time in to be able to take that extra money home. So there's a lot of provisions in here that are really important.
Yeah, you know, I dine out once in a while, and a lot of the folks that I talk to, some of them actually voted for President Trump, many of them, and they're looking at their watch waiting for those taxes to
stay in place. Because, and, you know, also some of the you know, capital gains and there's other tax provisions that are set to expire, but making those permanent or extending them, we'll see what happens over the next couple of days, is really important. And my belief is that let's keep more money in taxpayers' pockets rather than it going to Washington. And I think most Americans agree with that.
Congressman, you mentioned the Senate parliamentarian. Senator Tommy Tuberville is actually calling for the Senate parliamentarian to be fired.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this, and what role does the parliamentarian actually play in the Senate? And is it a partisan position?
I'm glad the Alabama senator is calling for her to be fired, because, you know, my question today is she's taken out a lot of the Medicaid savings provisions, like, you know, requiring illegals. They can't be allowed to be on Medicaid, able-bodied individuals, you know, so she's taken those provisions out. What I don't understand is how can you pass Obamacare under the same reconciliation process and that be okay? Here's the problem: is the Senate has some of these archaic rules that they have been having to work through. And I think a lot of us are coming to the point where it's like, you know what, the country is being held back by the Senate parliamentarian and other Senate rules that they really need to address. I'm a House member. We're going to focus on House procedure, but I really would believe that the senators in the Senate right now have to take a step back and say, look, it seems like she's calling balls and strikes for one team a little more favorable than she's calling them for the other team.
So you did serve in Congress during the Obama administration.
Yes.
With Obamacare in the works. Is there a bit of a double standard?
I believe there is. I mean, you know, she was appointed by Harry Reid, former senator and the Senate leader. She's donated money to President Obama. She's partisan. You know, and I had dinner one time with Justice Scalia, and he is, of course, a Supreme Court member, and he told all of us, he said, just remember, whether you're a Supreme Court justice or anybody in this town, they're all political.
Yes, indeed. President Trump obviously hoping to see this bill reach his desk by July 4th.
Yeah.
But now that this has happened with the parliamentarian and this key Medicaid provision, these provisions are going to be removed. For those of us watching at home, what does this ruling mean in practical terms, and what might a delay look like? Where do you see this going?
Well, I'm going to trust Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune that they're looking at all of the options possible. But, as a member from Indiana that is on the Budget Committee, worked on the big, beautiful bill in committee, got it passed through the House, we're going to have to find a way forward because there's so many other provisions on the tax side, especially, that are really important, and on the defense side, because there's funding in the bill for the border that Tom Homan and the president need, and there's also defense spending. And as we see, China becoming a larger threat militarily, that we need to make sure our defense and our border are secure. But it's also going to be interesting, too, to see, how the president is on a roll. He's got some great momentum. So I think over these next 48 hours, we're going to see the president really pushing to get this across the finish line, and we need to do everything we can to do it.
Now, one of the major flashpoints in the big, beautiful bill has to do with the state and local tax deduction, as you had mentioned. What impacts do you think this might have on everyday Americans if Congress changes that deduction cap, which is currently at a $10,000 per household?
Well, Steve, it really depends where you live. And this is where a lot of us who come from states like Indiana, we're low-tax states, we've got responsible government, compared to New York, California, New Jersey, they're high-tax states. And by moving that threshold up, Hoosiers are going to have to offset. We're going to be subsidizing the difference of what New Yorkers are able to subtract off of their federal income taxes. So I don't think it's a fair provision. I think you should leave it alone. It's in the tax bill to increase it, but I think at the end of the day, this is another topic of conversation that we need to be telling these blue states, you're hurting your own citizens, you're hurting your own taxpayers by continuing to raise taxes. And here in Washington, we should treat everybody equally.
Congressman Stutzman, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.